All right, guys, happy Monday. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is a retired professional wrestler, and he's the former governor of Minnesota. Everyone, please give a huge welcome to Jesse Ventura. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Sabrina. Great to be on. Wonderful to be here. And, we were talking before the show. I had to explain to you that I'm really computer illiterate. I've never owned a cell phone, and I don't do computer on a general basis. So I credit my son for connecting me with you. And it makes it good because that requires father and son having to do things together then, which I like at this point in my life.
That's awesome. I know I have to tell you that you and Ralph Nader have been the most requested guests from my audience to come on.
Well, thank you. Ralph's an old friend. I remember when Ralph made his run for president a number of years ago, and I went to when he would come to Minnesota, I would go and attend, and I have great respect for Ralph Nader and consider him a friend today. He's also he's fun to be around because here you have a guy who is so committed. He lives in New York City. He doesn't own a car, and yet he did and spearheaded the biggest safety measures for cars throughout the United States of America. And he himself has nothing to do with the car. He rides the subway.
That's right. That's right.
And so, no, you respect someone like Ralph like that. And,
So I have to tell you, like, when I was growing up, like wrestling, it was huge. All of us, like me and my friends, we used to always watch like pro wrestling.
May I ask how old you are? Just so I didn't. Well, give me an idea of what era in wrestling you're talking about.
So I'm a millennial.
What is it? Oh, that confuses me right there. I don't pay attention. I guess I'm a baby boomer. That's what they tell me.
Yeah. Like
yeah.
My parents
Okay.
Are. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a boomer then. So you're millennials in the middle, like my son.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're cool now. Go ahead.
So we used to watch you guys like all the time, like Jake the Snake,
sure.
Undertaker. Like it was huge, really huge back then. I've always been curious, what was it like for you being a professional wrestler? Like, what was that like? Were you able to still go about your everyday life, or were you bombarded the way a lot of celebrities are?
Oh, no. The world of pro wrestling was and is and probably still is. I can't speak to it because I've been out of it for actually it's now 30 years, believe it or not. But, no, it's a world where you have to be dedicated. You have to be focused. When you came up like I did, there were over 20 some regional territories throughout the country that all had regionalized TV. And you would move to that particular area and you'd wrestle there for a while until you started to lose your draw. Then you could move to another part of the country where you were still brand new because they hadn't seen you on TV or nothing. They might have read about you in magazines and all that, but they hadn't seen you yet. Then what occurred, and I lived through all this and was part of it. Then what occurred in the mid-1980s, which is the part you're talking about, was when cable TV came in, where all of a sudden a station could be seen all over the country like that, not network, but cable, which was way cheaper than network television. And so Vince McMahon, he inherited the Northeast Territory, WWF at the time, from his father, bought out his father. He was not loyal to these other 25 promoters. They all had unwritten rules that nobody crossed over each other's boundaries, right? This is the old day. It's like Al Capone and the mafia, and it's, if I can put it in that type of description, they all had their territories throughout the country, right? And Vince then in the mid-'80s threw that to the wind, with the advent of cable TV, he went out and handpicked the greatest talent in each territory, brought it under one roof, and went across the nation. That's where you've seen Hulk Hogan, Jesse the Body Ventura, Jake the Snake Roberts, Andre the Giant, Tito Santana, Superfly Jimmy Snuka. He went and got us, and we were ready for it because wrestling was going through a huge change then. And it had the opportunity, and it blew up to what it is today, and it had the opportunity to even do more. I mean, I tried to unionize wrestling way back then and was, of course, slapped down for it. You know, anytime you try to unionize something, and that occurred because I was in Las Vegas at the height. Wrestling was going crazy. We're on NBC now, Saturday night's main event, all this stuff. And I got in an elevator with the great Gene Upshaw, who's the all-pro Hall of Fame guard of the Oakland Raiders, right? And Big Gene got in the elevator, and we looked at each other, and I'll never forget, Big Gene looked at me and raised that big finger of his, and he says, "You boys need to unionize." Because he was head of the NFL Players Association, the National Football League Union. And I said, "I know, Gene, I know we do." And then the story, at WrestleMania 2, right before it, I stood up in the dressing room. There was no executives there. And I said, "Boys, now's the time to unionize." I said, if we threaten to walk out, they've already did the publicity. If we threaten to walk out, the federal law requires they can come in and we can unionize if we stick together here. Well, when I was finished making my speech, it all went by the wayside. I got home a day later and Vince McMahon calls me. "What's this about you trying to form a union?" Reads me this and that. Well, I ended up having to I quit the WWF, but I was in a fortunate situation. I had to anyway because he wasn't going to let me do it. I had already gotten the role in Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so I quit the WWF and went off to Mexico for 10 weeks and filmed Predator with Arnold. And then while I was filming with Arnold, he wanted me to join him and do his next film that fall, The Running Man. So I got that negotiated out of the way, put it back in my back pocket. And then at this point, when McMahon wanted me back, well, I now had what we term as FU money, if you know what that is. I'll let you use your imagination on it because I don't like to use words like that generally. But I now had FU money waiting in the wings. I'm getting ready to do The Running Man. I just did the Predator, and he needs me back because NBC wants me for Saturday night's main event. I'm the voice. And so I then went back and negotiated with him, and then learned later it was Hulk Hogan who ratted me out to Vince.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, that happened a number of years later when I went to federal court against Vince. I had to, he had to do a federal deposition, and I told my attorney the story. And I said, if you can work it around, find out who it was that told him that I talked of unionizing. And so in a deposition, they can ask anything. And so my attorney was brilliant. We won the case against Vince, but that's here down the road. But and he asked Vince, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And Vince said no. My attorney said, has there anyone that ever tried to form one? And Vince thought a moment, said, yeah, I think Jesse Ventura spouted his mouth off about it once, way back. And my attorney said, well, did you hear Mr. Ventura do this? And he said, oh, no. He said, then how do you know he did it? And with no hesitation, Vince McMahon said, oh, Hulk Hogan told me. And he was my friend. And in the days that I came up in wrestling, that's the worst thing you could be. There was a term called an office stooge. And that's a guy who pretends to be with the boys, but all the time is stooging back to the promoters. That's what you lived under in those days of wrestling. And they still live under it today because there's no union today in wrestling at all. I tried to do it 30 years ago. And then the reason I didn't continue, when I went to do Predator, I became a member of the Screen Actors Guild. I had to do Predator. So from that day forward, I today have retirement from the Screen Actors Guild. For years, I had health insurance through the Screen Actors Guild, all of that, while the pro wrestlers got nothing. And when I came back to Vince, I said, Vince, I'm not going to say nothing anymore. He says, oh, really? Why? I said, well, because if these guys are too stupid and don't want to fight for it, I got mine. I said, I'm a member of the Screen Actors Guild now. I got health insurance. I got retirement. Everything's great. If they don't want it, that's up to them. So I let it lie, and I never did nothing more.
So what do people do? Like, I know Hulk Hogan later on had a reality show. The Rock got into acting.
Oh, Rock's huge today. Rock is, he's through the roof.
He's up there.
He's way up there.
I wonder, like, the other wrestlers that retired, like, what do they do if they're not getting anything else?
There's a lot of them that, I saw it when I got into wrestling. That's one of the reasons I brought up a union. There's no retirement. I use it when Vince called me and fought with me over this. I said, Vince, we're not getting this just to fight you. I said, right now, and this was way back in the 80s, I said, right now I'm paying over $5,000 a year for health insurance for my family. I said, if we had a union, there's strength in numbers. That drives the prices down. I said, right now, I see all these old pro wrestlers. I see them all the time. They spent 25 years in the wrestling business. They don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of now. If there was a union, maybe they'd get $500 a month in retirement or something of that order. The NFL has it, baseball has it, everybody else has it. And here's the deal. I never could figure out, we're on television wrestling. Why didn't AFTRA, the American Federation of Television People, why didn't they require wrestlers to join their union when we're on TV? And that's and I figured out why. You want to know why they never insisted upon it, Sabrina?
Why?
Money, of course. They would have then got all these wrestlers on their health insurance plan. Do you want a group of 100 and some wrestlers coming onto your health insurance plan? We get beat up in that ring. And if for people that say, oh, it's fake and this and that, here's a statistic to look at. The death rate among pro wrestlers dying prematurely is way younger than the National Football League.
Wow.
So you tell me, Sabrina, there was a time in my career, and I don't hold any record by any stretch of the imagination. There was a time in my career I wrestled 63 consecutive nights in a row.
Wow.
And that included driving there and home. Not just getting in the ring. That included travel. 63 straight days I wrestled every night without a day off back when I was, I think, 26. I'd gotten out of the Navy, and I was about a year or two into my pro wrestling career in Portland, Oregon.
Oh my gosh, this is interesting. That explains a lot now, because like I said before, like, wrestlers don't have protective gear. I mean, football players at least have like pads.
You're naked pretty well. And the difference though today, I hate it today. I can't watch it today at all. You know why? It dawned on me, Sabrina, why? No, you know why I can't watch it today? There's no rules. No, there isn't. You can walk into the ring today, glom the guy with the chair, right? The first thing you do in the match, and you don't get disqualified. In my day, you had to have the artistic ability to cheat and hide it from the ref. You could, in my day, if you threw, and here's how it cheapened it too. If you threw a guy out over the top rope in my day, that was an automatic disqualification because it was considered so dangerous. Today, they jump out over the top rope 5-8 times a match.
Yep.
See, it's what you're looking. Do you know what happened? And I'll tell you this. We like to laugh at Mexico. But what you see in the United States today is the takeover of lucha libre. What went on for decades south of the border in Mexico is the wrestling you see today in the US of A. Mexico won.
Wow.
There were two styles in my day. Two styles. There was the US style and there was a Mexican style. What you're seeing in the US today is what was the lucha libre Mexican style, where everybody's like a Marvel comic superhero.
Wow. Wow. That is
So
interesting.
you're getting the Jesse the Body firsthand insight into a sport that I am the greatest announcer of all time. No one will ever surpass me. You see, Sabrina, that you're bringing out the old Jesse.
Yep. So I'm curious.
Sure.
A lot of us, myself and audience members, we were former, or most of us were former, like Bernie Sanders supporters.
Yep.
And we've become, very disappointed with him, the two-party system altogether, the squad. And so we're just like, we're done with the two-party system. And one person I always point to is the fact that when we bring up third parties, a lot of people who still want to do the duopoly, they're like, well, third parties can't win. And I always mention, I'm like, well, let's talk about on the local level and not just the national level. And I say, well, Jesse Ventura won. There's third party. Green Party has put people into these offices as well on the local level, but they don't want to talk about that.
And Sabrina, I'm not so local. I was one of 50. That's a governor. That goes higher when you're winning a state. That puts you as a player in the big game too. You're on the fringe. You're on the fringe and let's remember, people forget there were two independent governors when I was governor. The other one just doesn't get the publicity I got. And he's still there. He's a U.S. Senator today. And his name is Angus King from Maine. Angus King and I were both independent governors. Fun story, Sabrina. They have the National Governors Convention, right? Where all the governors go to Washington and you get your day with the president and they have meetings. And on one day, all the Republican governors meet in this building in Washington and all the Democratic governors meet in that building in Washington. Well, the governors people didn't provide anywhere for Angus and me. Mm-hmm. What happens to the two independent guys? So you know what we did? We walked down Constitution Avenue and sat on the park bench, and we held the independent governors caucus. Me and Angus, right? Guess what happened? The entire Washington media followed us. We had a group of media around us. You'd have thought it was Ali and Frazier. and because the other guys were locked in rooms in a building. Angus and I were out on the street. And I made the point of saying it. I said, you notice they didn't provide anything for us independent governors to meet. Right. So we're meeting out here. So I would ask you, press, please go a half a block away when we're done talking to you so Angus and I can hopefully talk in private. And they did. They were very nice to us. But that just shows you that, no, it can be done. And I'll tell you right now, Sabrina, 2024 is prime.
Yes, that's what I was saying. I was just telling people
2024 is prime. Oh, let me tell you why. Andrew Yang and the Forward Party is going forward. Now, this is a party made up of a lot of forward thinking, let's get things done, not necessarily on the fringe. Call us the dirty word that many of us are, is centrists. Us dirty centrists who sit in the middle, which is the majority of America. How do you think I won in Minnesota? I had the middle. The Dems had the left, the Repubs had the right, and Jesse had the middle and won. And so what's happening is this. You got a movement to bring the United States together again, which only an independent can do. I did it in Minnesota. My first year in office, I had a Democratic Senate and a Republican House. For 3 years, whoever I sided with generally prevailed until the 4th year. The 4th year, election year, they jumped in bed together to oppose me. See, so only a centrist can get the country back together again. Only a third party can get these two. See, they fear the third party more than they do themselves. So they will work together for fear of a third party entering the game. You following me?
I was going to ask you about Forward Party because
Well, I'm in the Forward Party all the way, hook, line, and sinker. They're going to have a convention in 2024. They got money that they're getting legally and good. It ain't special interest money. And right now, a former colleague of mine, Republican governor from New Jersey, Christy Todd Whitman, is one of the co-chairs, along with Andrew Yang, a Democrat. See, we're coming together to say we're going to rebuild the United States of America to what it ought to be, where we're not running around screaming at each other because of the left and the right, so polar opposed to each other. That ain't going to win nothing for us. That brings back the Civil War. I'll tell you this, Sabrina, I can't forgive Republicans right now. And I'll tell you why. Because Republicans carried a Confederate flag through my Capitol and no one's apologized for it. I'm waiting for an apology from the Republicans, their party, their leadership, anyone. And I'm not going to get it from Donald Trump, whom I personally know. But that aside, that's why I'm angry with them. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. When I take an oath, Sabrina, I also took an oath 47 years ago, and guess what? My wife and I just celebrated our 47th anniversary because I took an oath. So let me explain what oaths mean to Jesse Ventura. So I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I today view the Republican Party as a domestic enemy to our Constitution for what they did January 6th, when my Capitol was attacked physically. 5 people died in that attack. So I want to do something to heal this country, get us back to what we ought to be. And like me, Sabrina, you need to understand, Jesse Ventura is socially liberal, but Jesse Ventura is fiscally conservative.
Right.
I feel that government is far too large. It goes into many places it don't belong. But on the social issues right now, I think it's more important to keep. We used to have an old cliche in the Independence Party in Minnesota. You know what it was? Here's what it was. I don't want a Democrat in the boardroom, and I don't want a Republican in the bedroom.
I'm sorry, it's funny.
Because Democrats don't know how to do business, and Republicans want to interfere with your sex life, to be blunt.
Well, okay, so here's the thing.
All right.
We were talking about Forward Party recently, and I'm not sure if Andrew Yang's aware of this. I would like to talk to him about this as well. But when he used the term centrist, for those of us, I think that we're further left or
Right.
Marxist or whatever, it's a turn off because we're just like, what is happening here? We already have centrists in the Democratic Party. So I think that's one of the concerns. And the other concern is, where does it stand on healthcare? Because I didn't see anything on the website about Medicare for all. And a lot of us are for Medicare for all.
So am I. But it ain't going to get done until we get control again. Tell someone, see, I tell my son every day, Sabrina, that his father's a genius. And you're talking to a genius right now. You know why I'm a genius, Sabrina?
Why?
I have something that's very rare today. I have something called common sense. If you have common sense today, that makes you a genius.
But do you think?
No, and I'm saying I'm for, hey, here's my belief, give you mine. In a country as rich as America, no one, everyone, I should say, everyone, if they're sick, should be able to go to the doctor. End of story. End of story. I'm going through it right now. I lost my job at Russian television, and I'm on Social Security. Well, with my job at RT, I lost my health care. Do you know I'm on Xarelto, right? Blood thinners, because I've had clotting issues 3 times in my life. Okay. Do you know what's just happened to me, Sabrina? My Xarelto went from $25 a month. Last month it cost me $500 because I lost my health insurance. Now I had to file for this COBRA stuff, which allows me to get my old insurance back till I can reinsure. And thank God they're hopefully going to pass this bill now that's going to allow the government to get prescription drugs at a reasonable price, so I don't have to pay $500 a month to keep myself alive on Xarelto. So I know what you're talking about. And you can be a centrist and know that. But you can also, don't be fearful of a centrist. We're common sense. We're in the middle. Hey, okay, you've had enough of centrists in the Democratic Party. Well, you ain't had enough of centrists in the Republican Party, have you? And guess what? You ain't going to win without them. People got to start realizing in order to win and succeed and go forward in a democracy requires compromise. Nobody gets all or none. There's going to be the other side. You fight them. And when you get the opportunity, you beat them. But there's going to be times they might beat you. And that's what keeps a democracy what it is. But for all one way or all one the other way, that's where us centrists sit. Wait a minute. I don't want it to be all socialism. I don't want I think my belief is you have capitalism and you have socialism, and what you try to do is you find that common denominator of both to where you can get them to work together to uplift everyone. And when everyone gets uplifted, everyone succeeds more. And I've been a governor, and I've been a mayor, and I live in a capitalist society. So you've got 2 major confrontations between capitalism and socialism that we're trying to blend together. Now, are we going to let it go all socialist and the end of capitalism? Or are we going to go all capitalism, end of socialism? Well, we found out neither of those things work, do they? You had Russia, which was all socialism that self-destructed, right? And then you had us when the Wall Street crap took over, and you saw pure capitalism at its worst, and you saw self-destruct with that 20 years ago. You need a balance between the two, and that's where that nasty word, Sabrina, that you're so afraid of comes into play. Centrist.
Yeah, because when I hear centrist, I think Bill Clinton. And that's why I'm just like, I don't know. Because if you think about someone like Bernie Sanders, like a lot of the policies that he was running on were very popular.
Right. Oh, I actually tell you this story. I actually went down when Bernie came to Minneapolis. Me, Jesse Ventura, the ultimate independent. I've never voted for a Democrat or Republican, and I've never ran as one. I went down to meet Bernie, thinking I might endorse him. Well, I got down there, I had called his people, and, well, they couldn't quite get me in to see him immediately, so I had to sit around and wait a little bit, the 38th governor of Minnesota, when you're running for president, you know. And then when I did get to see him, I got a brief moment with him in the hallway as he was moving from one thing to the next. I didn't even get into the room with him, but I was able to ask him what I needed to know. And here's what I asked him. I said, Senator, if you lose to Secretary Clinton in the Democratic primary, I said, will you support or will you run as a third party, or will you support a third party candidate if one comes along? And he looked me right in the eye and said, no, I will support Secretary Clinton. I looked at him and said, thank you. And I turned around and left, and knew right there Bernie was not getting my endorsement, because Bernie Sanders, I learned at that moment, was a Democrat hiding in independent clothing. He was portraying himself and getting elected as an independent so he could try to draw in independents who didn't want to be part of the two gangs, while the real Bernie is a Democrat when it comes down to, because when he said he would give his full support to Hillary Clinton, I just looked at him and said, thank you, and turned around and left. And I never more sought to endorse him or to do it, because see, I'm for a third entity. I want three choices. And the only way today, in my opinion, to get three choices that I see on the horizon, legitimate right now in my lifetime, because I'm 71, Sabrina, is Andrew Yang. He, I look at as the biggest hopeful thing. If we don't, and Andrew's one of these guys who works with figures, right? He's one of these, computerized guys. He told me, he said, every indication right now, we're going to see a Trump-Biden rematch in 74. Now, 60% of the country don't like either one of them. Sabrina, throw Jesse Van... Did you know what I dabbled with the Green Party last big election, right?
Yep.
Okay, they were fractured. I saw that right away. I said, you mean I got to try to put a party together that's fractured down the middle and then take on the Dems and Repubs? Impossible. And so, but did you see what Fox News did? Fox News got wind of it. This is Fox News. And they threw my name into a poll with Biden, Trump, and Ventura. I polled 18%, and the Greens didn't want me. And in fact, you know what one of the quotes was from the Greens? You know what it was? Well, is he one of us?
So that's a question I did have for you as well, because a lot of people ask that question, like, why didn't Jesse run in 2020? We're hearing from you now, because I saw that poll and I was like, well, if Jesse Ventura ran like 18%, like that's huge.
Yeah,
for
but the
candidate.
Sabrina, the Greens wouldn't endorse me. They gave it to I forget his name, Howie Hawkins. Howie Hawkins got there, and Howie wouldn't give his delegates to me. I said, here I am. And they were so fractured and divided, and they're like most third parties. They really don't want to win. They just want to make a statement. See, that's what I've run into in all my dealings with third party politics. They don't really want to win, because if you really want to win, you got to get in the mud. And you got to fight the fight. Now, that don't mean you got to sell your soul. I've never sold. A few years back, I got to tell you this story, Sabrina. A few years back, I was going to run, and I could have. And people thought I was nuts when I said, I'll run, but I need Howard Stern as my running mate. And people said, what is he, crazy, Howard Stern? Let me explain the method to my madness. Howard Stern keeps me clean. Howard Stern, can you imagine how much money he could raise just saying on the radio, Jesse and I need $20 a piece? Howard Stern could raise $40 million overnight. That keeps me clean. $20 ain't going to get you in the office. I don't have to take PAC money. I've never took PAC money. Also, here's the fun part about it. If you're going to be that type of presidential candidate, Sabrina, you need a VP who is despicable. That way, they're not going to kill you and put him in office. See, if I ran with Howard Stern, they're not going to kill Jesse Ventura and make Howard Stern president, are they?
That's a good point.
You know who told me that? when I was getting out of office, as Minnesota governor, I had a getting out of office party, and my good friend Charles Barkley came. And I was having fun, and this is before Barack Obama was even on the screen. This is 2003. And I said that night, I said, well, if I ever go for president, I said, I want Charles Barkley as my running mate. And they took the mic over to Charles in the Hilton Hotel, wherever it was. And Charles said, Governor, I think that's a brilliant idea, because Charles goes, you know I'm fiscally conservative, and you know I like smaller government, and I don't like to pay, all these taxes, smaller government. He said, I'd make a great VP candidate. But he said, the most reason? And I said, why, Charles? He said, well, if you took me, we could fire the Secret Service and save all that money. And I, like the dummy, stepped right into the joke. I said, how could we fire the Secret Service, Charles? And he goes, well, there ain't nobody out there going to kill you and put a black man like me in there. Now, remember, this is 2003, before Barack was even on the screen. And I sat, when Charles Barkley said that to me, I said, he's right. And it stuck with me all these years. You got to have a VP guy who can't take the office. You want the opposite. That way you won't see, because I don't buy that Lee Harvey Oswald killed John Kennedy. I don't believe that. I will, no way. And here's a belief I have: if they can kill the president in broad daylight and get away with it, who can't they kill?
Well, I have to show you, Rokana was on here recently, and I mentioned to him, that majority of Americans want a third party. And I think he was taken aback a little bit about this, but I want to show you this, and I want to get your reaction, because I don't think this sat too well with him. The majority, go ahead, and it's just a clip here. The majority of Americans want a third party. Neither Republicans or Democrats are actually helping the American people. Like, we see them helping corporations all the time. I would actually say that 2024 would actually be the time that a third party candidate could actually stand a good shot.
Now, if there is an independent grassroots candidate who is standing for bold progressive policies, fine. But usually the independent third party candidates tend to be billionaires or celebrities. And it's not clear to me that those policies that they're going to advocate are going to be Medicare for all, or free public college, or the progressive policies that many people, your listeners, care about.
Well, I happen to know one here locally pretty well who was grassroots third party candidate, and that was Dr. Jill Stein. And when she ran, we were guilt tripped to vote for Hillary Clinton. But I still say to this day that Jill Stein was the better candidate.
Well, I supported Hillary Clinton in the general election, and I'm proud of supporting Hillary Clinton. I think that Trump was such a threat to democracy, and is such a threat to democracy. Look, if Hillary Clinton had won, we would not have had Roe versus Wade overturned. So I do not agree with people who supported Jill Stein, especially in swing states, because the costing of Hillary Clinton that election really led to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and the Supreme Court that we currently have.
Well, I would say that Hillary Clinton's campaign cost her the election herself. I feel like that was her doing. Ignoring the Rust Belt, I think, was a totally awful idea. You cannot avoid the Rust Belt. Having a running mate who was anti-choice, Tim Kaine, was not pro-choice when it came to abortion, was also not a good idea. And she's corporate. So for me, I was looking for someone who's grassroots, someone who actually cares about the people, someone who is not going to get us into these never-ending wars. And Hillary Clinton was just going to be an extension of Barack Obama. And people wanted something different. So I don't blame someone like Jill Stein. I blame Barack Obama. I think he's the one that actually gave us Trump in the first place, because he made all these promises and he didn't fulfill them. So that didn't go too well for Rokana, but...
Well, you hit a great point there, Sabrina, and that is this. Notice how whenever the Democrats lose, they blame the third party. They do not blame their policies. They don't blame their candidates. It's always, oh, the third party interfered, siphoned off votes. And what they're telling you basically is the standard storyline, the pick the lesser of two evils.
Yep.
And, well, as the late, great Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead said once, if you're made to pick the lesser of two evils, aren't you still picking evil?
Yep.
I mean, and that was Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead, a musician. He saw it, and this guy, he's the perfect Democrat. Blame the third party. Blame Jill Stein. If there wouldn't have been Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton would have won.
Yep.
That's their standard ploy. And there's only a few times it hasn't worked. And one of them was Minnesota.
That's right. That's right.
Well,
I want to
the reason was because I won, so they couldn't blame me. They truly could blame me for losing. But the fact was I won as a third party.
Yeah, and they act like that was the first time a third party candidate ran in a presidential election. I mean, Cynthia McKinney ran the same year Barack Obama won. I mean, it's
Sabrina,
not the first time.
Are you familiar what they did to us in the mid-90s? Okay, Ross Perot ran in 92 and got 19% of the vote, right? Then a war happened in the Reform Party, which I won't go into. We had former Colorado Governor Dick Lamb all set to be our presidential nominee the next year or the next presidential to show we were growing. But the Perot forces came in, cut his legs out, so we got Perot twice. But here's the important thing. It came to that election with Clinton versus Dole. And you got to hear this story. This is the truth. When that came to that, okay, Bob Dole didn't want Perot in the debates. Now, here's Perot, who got 1 out of 5 votes. Doesn't that put him in the debates? He just got 1 out of 5 votes in the previous presidential election, 20%. So that comes to 96. Perot, Dole doesn't want him in the debates because he thinks it'll strip from his conservative base. Bill Clinton doesn't want him in debates because Bill Clinton doesn't want to debate at all. He's so far ahead. Debates can only bring him back. He's going to win. So Dole and Clinton cut a deal, the two parties, backed up by the Federal Debate Commission because they're nothing but hand-picked former heads of the two parties that run it. So here's the agreement that happened. Normally there's 3 presidential debates. Because Clinton didn't want debates, they cut it to 2. That was his payoff for then agreeing to keep Perot out of the debates. So that year, there were only 2 presidential debates and 1 VP debate. Normally, there's 3 and 1. And get this, the 2 presidential debates, by design, were held on the same night as the World Series.
Of course.
Sure. Now, what should a good American watch? The debates. But what are we all going to watch? The World Series. Come on, let's live in the real world. So see what the manipulation that took place in the 96 election with a third party. Perot got 20% of the vote the previous election and was then denied by the 2 political parties of even debating in 96.
And that, I see that seems like that's when it started, because I haven't seen third party candidates debate like since.
Well, I'll give you this one. When I won governor in Minnesota, of course, then the big election became Bush and Gore. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that I had won in 98. This was in 2000, and I had to travel to New York. And when I got to, I was traveling in Manhattan in the middle of the night with the window down, and we came to construction guys. And one of them looked over and saw me in the limo. And he raised his hand, pointed, and goes, "Hey," he goes, "the wrong governor's running," and pointed at me. And this was a guy in the middle of Manhattan in the middle of the night.
Wow.
But do you know why I couldn't run? I had a lot of people telling me to run in 2000. You know why I couldn't? I couldn't because I made a commitment to the state of Minnesota in 1998 that I wanted to be their governor. I do not seek another political office while I currently hold one, because I committed to do that job first, so therefore I would not run for president in 2000 and then run off and do that. And after I said I wanted to be the Minnesota governor, I got to live with myself and look in the mirror. That's first and foremost. So that's why I didn't run in 2000. And like I said, I didn't run last time because the Greens they wouldn't have me. They were fractured, and even though I polled 18% on Fox,
Wow.
they chose that, and so I just moved on. And I don't plan on running in 2024, but I'll say this: you never say never. No one predicts the future. If Andrew Yang and them come to me and they can present to me ballot access, I'll put it to you this way, Sabrina: you give me ballot access in all 50 states and let me go in the debates, I'll beat them both. I go by a simple premise, the Jesse the Body rule. If I can debate them, I can beat them.
Wow. It's interesting because I talked to Cynthia McKinney earlier this morning, and I asked her the same thing you just told me. I said, would you run, if you move back to the United States, would you consider running for president again? She said the same thing. Well, never say never. So I was like, okay.
There was talk of Cynthia and I running together.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that talk has taken place a lot. I love Cynthia. Cynthia and I correspond. We talk to each other occasionally, and again, all you progressives, you don't need to fear someone like me, because on the big issues, I'm as progressive as you need. Now, let me argue something, though, on the school stuff and the higher education. I like to argue this one.
Uh-oh.
See, when I grew up, there was the draft, right? So all the rich kids got to run off to college, and they were immune from the draft. They got deferments. But kids like me that grew up in the inner city, I went to Minneapolis Roosevelt High School. Kids like me had to go to Vietnam and got drafted into the military because we couldn't afford to go to college, right? So when I went into the military, I thought, wow, I figured out a way to go to college. If I serve my 4 years in the military, when I get out, I get the GI Bill, and then they pay me to go to college.
Yep.
So I had to sacrifice part of my life in which to get a payback to go to college. I never even used it. I used it 1 year and then started pro wrestling. So I still got 3 years on my GI Bill sitting out there. But the point I'm getting to, and the point I'm making, is the rich kids got out of Vietnam, they got out of the service and got to go to college. And because they incur a bunch of debt, all of a sudden we're going to now have to get rid of that debt. What about the guys like me who went into the military, didn't go to college because you didn't want to incur that debt? See, my mother taught me something growing up. I have two parents. Both of them are World War II veterans, and not many people can say their mom is a World War II veteran. My mom was a nurse in North Africa, which predates the Normandy invasion. She was fighting the Nazis before Normandy. My mom, as well as my dad. And my mom taught me to be debt-free. She said, if you're in debt, you're a slave. And I've lived my life that way, being debt-free. So all these kids that went to college and incurred all this debt, they chose to incur it. Now, while granted, there's some bad things that have been done to them while incurring this debt, and I have sympathy for those things. The government should hold on to the debt, not sell it to these debt collectors and all this other crap that I've heard about. But I just want to be straightforward, Sabrina. Where there's a will, there's a way. And a lot of rich kids got out of serving the country in Vietnam because they could go to college and they could go get student loans and all this stuff, while us poor kids, we got trooped off to Vietnam. And thank God we had people like Muhammad Ali who stood up and said no. But unfortunately, Jesse Ventura volunteered, said yes, and joined the Navy because the Navy's never drafted. And then Jesse Ventura goes into the Brownwater Navy, the underwater demolition SEAL team, which is about the worst you can go into if you want action. But that's who I am. But then again, so, when you start talking, Jesse Ventura, about student debt and student loans and all that stuff, I got to be convinced. I'm a hardliner on that, and you can't blame me because of my background and what I lived through personally, watching the rich kids get out of it while the poor kids bled and died.
Okay.
And when I got out of the service, I immediately joined the Stop the Draft movement to end the draft. I also drug my wife out of the house for the Equal Rights Amendment in Minnesota and made her go protest that too. So Jesse Ventura likes the First Amendment, and Jesse Ventura uses the First Amendment throughout his life.
So here it comes. I have to tell you that I was a former academic advisor in higher education. I went to state college. My dad was former military, so
Sure.
we didn't have a lot of money to like send me to college. My parents paid what they could pay, and the rest I took out in student loans. Here's the problem with my generation and the students that I advised. We were pretty much, preached to by our guidance counselors in high school that we had to go to college if we wanted to have like a decent living, if we wanted to make if we didn't want to end up, struggling financially.
Sure.
So we listened to that. Then what happened is that college over time has become incredibly expensive, including the state schools. So I'm in Massachusetts. University of Massachusetts is charging people $30,000 a year for tuition. That's ridiculous for a public school. So what's happening is these kids are getting into the colleges and even the state schools, but they still have to take out the student loans. Then they graduate from college and we're getting jobs, but the jobs aren't paying us what we should make to adjust for inflation. And then at the same time, you still have the interest on the loans accumulating. For me, I can tell you my student loans is not so much how much I borrowed, it's the interest.
Yep. No, and I agree. Sabrina, I agree. They should do something to eliminate the interest. Get rid of at least that. No. Sabrina, I'm not deaf ears. You guys got sold a bill of goods. Certainly you did. The same as we were sold them back in the Vietnam era. Back then we were told the same thing. Back then it was you better go to college or you're going to Vietnam. That was what you were faced. So of course kids would try to get student, loans rather than go to Vietnam necessarily. Vietnam changed and did not become a popular war, most definitely, especially with the students. They were first and foremost that protested against the Vietnam War. So I know, and I have a sympathetic ear. You guys are getting raked over the coals and somebody needs to do something about it. But also I like to make the same people think. And I like to call them to task a little, saying, so always remember, too, where there's a will, there's a way. And there's ways to, to educate yourself and do it and not always go into debt. Because do you agree with me? Debt, my mom bought a new car every 4 years. You know how she did it? That's about when the warranty ended. And she would do it. She'd save up during that 4 years. And she'd trade in the old one, never took out a loan. She paid off, she saved up and paid off, because in those days, they'd always say, well, how do you want to pay for this? And if you said cash at the end, they'd even lower the price more to get the cash. And my mom paid cash and bought a new car every 4 years. And all she was a nurse.
Yeah, my generation can't do that.
Right. But still, it shows don't go into debt. It shows how destructive debt can be. That's the point I'm making, Sabrina, for people to listen and pay attention to. Be afraid of debt, because a debt is slavery. If you get caught up in debt, you can't be free, because somebody owns you then. Somebody owns that debt. I sit here today, Sabrina, and my mom didn't harp this to me. I learned this watching her. My mom ran the money in my house, not my dad. My mom was the one that did it, not my dad. My dad didn't even drive. My mom drove. But there was a reason for that. I found out later, after my dad had passed, that he didn't drive because of post-traumatic stress of World War II. He was with the anti-tank unit. And so, needless to say, I found out he had to drive over so many dead bodies that he couldn't get behind the wheel of a car ever again. But that was never made known to me until after he was gone. I asked him one time, I said, Dad, because we grew up in the Beaver Cleaver era. And I said, Dad, how come your mom drives and you don't? All other families' dads drive. And my dad just looked at me and says, oh, I don't trust myself. That was good enough for me. I thought, well, if you don't trust yourself, you shouldn't drive, right? And then it was my mom after my dad passed away. I happened to bring it up the subject one day, and she said, "Oh, that he didn't tell you. That wasn't the reason." And I said, "Well, what was the reason Dad didn't drive?" And she said, "Well, that was post-traumatic stress from World War II, driving the tank destroyers, apparently over so many bodies out on the battlefield it looked like cordwood. And so he could never get behind the wheel of a vehicle without apparently getting flashbacks or being very uncomfortable." By the way, and I can solve your student debt for you. You want Jesse Ventura to solve student debt? I can do it right now. You want it, Sabrina?
Jesse. Go ahead.
To show you how presidential I am, I can give Sabrina the answer right now, nationally, to solve student debt. You ready?
I'm ready.
Nationally legalize cannabis and marijuana, tax it a normal tax like you do alcohol, and take all the money from those taxes and apply it to the student debt loan, and it's gone. They're doing it in Colorado. Look at, she's speechless. Jesse Ventura just solved student debt for the first time on Sabrina's show. That's the first time I've uttered those words, Sabrina. I've never before spoken that before. Right now, that would solve student debt through the United States of America. Legalize cannabis, marijuana, put a normal tax on it like you do alcohol, take that taxed money and apply it to the student debt, and you all are off the hook.
I never thought about that. I mean, we legalized.
Sabrina, are you now going to support me for president?
Okay, so here's the thing.
Sabrina, I asked you a point blank question. Am I your man for president now?
I got to hear about health care.
I already told you. I'm for health care. I told you that. I believe in this rich country, no one who's sick should not be able to go to a doctor. That's exactly what you're asking for.
This is true. This is true.
Ta-da! Sabrina, am I your candidate for president or what? I just solved your student loan problem.
Are you running through the Forward Party?
Yeah, if it happens, it'll be with them.
I don't
They're
know.
the one. I run with them because they're the ones that have the idea to win. The rest of these parties are not focused to winning.
But I think
you got to win to do something.
But I think the thing is like, oh, okay, so you got to understand, like, I'm what people would call a Marxist. So for me, when I looked at the Forward Party's platform, I was like, it sounds corporate.
Sabrina, would we be better than what you got now?
A lot of things will be better than what we have now, though.
You go. There you go. It has to come, Sabrina, in increments. You're a Marxist. Great. You're never going to turn the United States Marxist. Not in your lifetime, your kid's lifetime, or their kid's lifetime. Ain't going to happen. Be a realist. Make your point, score where you can, and allow the anti-Marxists to exist too.
Well, then what do you say about people like Shama Sawant? Like, she's Marxist, she's one socialist alternative. They're doing Shama Sawant.
I don't even know who she is. You got to remember, Jesse ain't on the internet.
Okay, Shama Sawant, she's a Marxist. She's a part of an organization called Socialist Alternative.
Okay.
She's city councilor in Seattle, and they tried to recall her about last year. They tried multiple times to find ways to take her out, but the reason why she was able to win is because Socialist Alternative organized on the ground first.
Sure.
And they did the Fight for 15 in Seattle. So they organized the people and the workers first, and then the candidate came from the movement.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. I'm not against that. That's what democracy is. She won an election. Great. Now, can she control the agenda? I doubt it. She's just one person on that panel. I know because, see, Sabrina, I've been a mayor. I was mayor of the 6th largest city in Minnesota for 4 years, Brooklyn Park. So I know local politics. I know how that works too. I've been a mayor. I've been a governor. I know the executive branches at both levels very well because I served as both. And if she won, I have nothing against that. A Marxist wins an election at a local level, wonderful. If she won Congress, great. She's only one vote. We live in a democracy. You got to get enough votes to make it happen. And you ain't going to win enough votes with total Marxism. It ain't going to happen in America. Be a realist.
Well,
you can still accomplish things.
For me, Yang would have to, like, there could not be corporate money attached. That's a big one for me. And the other thing is I saw Andrew
I've never
Yang.
taken corporate money. I can tell you that personally. I took no Do you know how much, Sabrina, I bet you don't even know this. Do you know how much money I raised to become governor of Minnesota?
How much?
300,000. Ooh, that opened your eyes a little. I like that. Your eyes got wider. Yeah, $300,000. And you know how I got that money? $50 donations, because Minnesota had a policy where people could give a $50 donation to the candidate of their choice and then write it off on taxes. It was a program they had. And you know what happened? The minute I won, the Dems and Republicans, when I left office, they took away that program so that no Jesse Ventura could ever rise up again. See, no,
wow.
all the money I got, it was through a program the state of Minnesota had, where you could give $50 to a candidate, governor's candidate, and then you get a receipt, and you could use that receipt and take it deducted off your taxes as a campaign contribution. That's how I took all my money. I did not take one penny from corporations. I took no money from special interest. In fact, Sabrina, my first day in office, do you know what my first orders were to my staff? I told my staff, okay, everyone, I didn't meet with one lobbyist to get elected governor of Minnesota. They did nothing to help me. So please put the word out that Jesse Ventura, 38th governor of Minnesota, does not meet with lobbyists. They can go find new jobs. And in my 4 years, I never met with a lobbyist. Sabrina, do you think I might? Gee, is he one of us?
It's not even.
Let's question whether, gee, is Jesse Ventura one of us? Now, we may not agree. I'm also pro-choice.
That's true.
You know, come on. I ain't going to, I'm not, again, and you know who made me pro-choice? My mother. You know why my mother made me pro-choice?
Why?
She was a nurse. I remember her coming home from work and telling me about the things they'd get in the emergency room because of the back alley abortions taking place back in the 50s and 60s. And I remember when Roe v. Wade came, and my mom as a nurse breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that they wouldn't have to face multiple lives dying because of something being illegal, because she made me understand, and it's carried with me with the war on drugs and everything of that nature. And that is this: just because you make something illegal doesn't mean it's going away.
That's true. That's true.
It just means now it's going to be run by criminals. So that's the true choice you make when you prohibit. Do you want this to be run by up in the open and fair, or do you want criminals to run it? Because it's not going to go away. Now abortion and that is going to be handled in all those states that ban it by quote unquote criminals, because they'll be breaking laws to do it. And that's going to bring an element that they shouldn't have to break laws to do that.
That's awesome. I have to say, like, you have to, like, listen, first and foremost, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah.
Next
you're
time
still,
you talk,
Sabrina, you're not telling me, am I your candidate? Come on. I mean, I've more than, I mean,
This is how I was trying to get out of this.
I should be your guy on Mount Rushmore. You know,
it's the Andrew Yang thing. It's the Andrew
why?
Yang.
Somebody's got to get you there. How are you going to get ballot access? If you ain't got ballot access, excuse my bluntness, you ain't doing shit. You've
It's
got
true.
to, and they have the opportunity to get ballot access. You got
Yeah.
to, you know, you can sit out here, Sabrina, and do all this you want of, giving alternatives, complaining that showing right from wrong. But until you get in the game and win, you can't change nothing.
Yeah. But why not take over a party that's already, why not take over the Green Party?
They're a mess. Who's going to put them? They're already fractured. They're in 5 different. I tried 4 years ago. I'm not a dummy. You know, I live by a simple thing, Sabrina. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I got the shame on you all once with the Green Party. You know, I made myself available in 2020, and they dropped the ball. Even after polling 18% on Fox. And put it this way, Sabrina, do you know what I was polling at the start of the debates in Minnesota? Now, the election's 6 weeks away. Do you know what my poll numbers were when the debates started between me and the two, Democrat and Republican? I was polling 10%. After the first debate, you know what started happening? The Democrats and Republicans started canceling debates immediately. But they had 2 more scheduled they couldn't get out of.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
And they were defeated. Now, bear in mind, and I'll let you finish then the show, bear in mind, Minnesota has an advantage for third-party candidates, and you know what that is? We have same-day registration. So people can go down, register, and then vote the same day. And we have no voter fraud whatsoever in the state of Minnesota. I know, because after I won, we did a major study on it and found out there was no voter fraud. You may have election fraud by people running for election, but there is no voter fraud. That's bullshit. Anyway, Sabrina, say your goodbyes. I just thought I'd give you the last double barrel before I go.
Thank you so much for joining, Jesse. And
You're
then
welcome, Sabrina. It's my pleasure.
Where can people find you, like on social media?
They can. I don't do social media. My son is doing it if it's being done. Like I said, I'm computer illiterate and I've never owned a cell phone, but I am on Substack every week. They can get my opinions and everything I do on Substack, and the show is called Die First, Then Quit. That's where they can find me, Substack. I lost my job at RT. Because of I've lost 2 jobs now because I lost my job at MSNBC because of the Iraq war. Yeah. I was opposed to that war and they wouldn't put me on the air because of my opposition to the invasion of Iraq, And so wars cost me jobs, Sabrina. So anyway, they can find me at Substack. Anything they want to do will be there. You'll get Jesse Ventura's opinion. And I know Sabrina's unwilling, but I'm her candidate. She just don't want to admit it. Bye, Sabrina.
Bye, Jesse.